A chance encounter. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the quiet streets of Berkeley, San Francisco. Inside the Golden Fork Cafe, the hum of familiarity filled the room. Regulars sipped their coffee, forks scraped against plates of pie, and the faint sound of a basketball game played on the old radio behind the counter. For Olivia, a 29-year-old waitress, this was more than just a job. The cafe was her sanctuary, a safe haven where she had built a small but meaningful life, filled with faces she knew and stories she cherished. But on this fateful evening, everything was about to change. The jingle of the cafe's bell echoed, drawing Olivia's attention to the door. She expected to see another familiar face, a local looking for their usual spot, but what she saw instead made her heart stop. Steph Curry, the Golden State Warriors' legendary point guard, walked in, his presence instantly commanding the room. He was dressed casually in a hoodie and sneakers, trying to keep a low profile, but it was impossible for someone like him to blend in. Even in his understated attire, he exuded a quiet confidence that filled the cafe. The room buzzed with excitement as whispers spread like wildfire. Customers craned their necks, some pulling out their phones to sneak a picture. "Is it really him?" someone whispered. "No way. That's Steph Curry," another replied. Olivia's pulse quickened as she adjusted her apron, forcing herself to remain composed. She had watched him dominate the court countless times, admired his philanthropy, and even dreamed of meeting him. But now, here he was, sitting at a booth, scanning the menu as if he were just another customer. Summoning her courage, Olivia approached his table, her hands trembling slightly. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "What can I get for you tonight?" Steph looked up, offering a warm smile. "Just a coffee, black, and maybe a slice of whatever pie you recommend." "Coming right up," Olivia replied, her nerves easing under his kind gaze. She turned back toward the counter, her mind racing. Steph Curry in their little cafe, it felt surreal. As she prepared his order, the murmurs around her grew louder. Some customers smiled in awe. Others debated whether it was really him. For Olivia, this was more than just a celebrity sighting. It felt like the beginning of something unexpected. But not everyone shared her excitement. At a corner table, Frank, a longtime regular and unapologetic Sacramento Kings fan, scowled. Known for his blunt opinions and sharp tongue, Frank was never one to shy away from making his voice heard. And tonight was no different. As Olivia placed the coffee and pie in front of Steph, she noticed Frank rising from his seat, his expression dark. A wave of unease washed over her as he sauntered toward Steph's table. "Excuse me," Frank said, his gruff voice cutting through the cafe chatter. "Aren't you that basketball guy, Steph Curry?" Steph looked up, his polite smile never wavering. "That's me." Frank crossed his arms, his tone dripping with disdain. "You make millions, huh? But what do you actually do for people? I hear all this talk about charity, but it's probably just for your image." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Olivia froze, her hands gripping her tray as she watched the exchange unfold. Steph remained calm, his expression steady. "I try to give back where I can," he said evenly. "I've supported education programs, built basketball courts, and helped fund disaster relief efforts. Frank scoffed, his voice rising. Sounds like a PR stunt to me. Guys like you only care about the headlines. Olivia's chest tightened as anger bubbled inside her. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Steph Curry, someone who had done so much good, was being unfairly criticized by someone who didn't know the full story. Unable to stay silent, she stepped forward. "That's not true," she said, her voice firm despite the nerves that threatened to betray her. All eyes turned to her, the weight of their stares heavy on her shoulders. But she pressed on. Steph Curry has given scholarships to kids who couldn't afford college, donated to mental health programs, and supported communities after disasters. He doesn't have to do any of that, but he does, because he cares. Frank turned to face her, his brows furrowed in skepticism. "And how do you know that? Just because you read it somewhere?" "No," Olivia replied, her voice steady now, "because actions speak louder than words. I've seen the stories of the people he's helped. Lives have been changed because of his foundation. And it's not fair to tear someone down when they're doing what they can to make a difference." Steph's gaze softened as he watched Olivia defend him. Gratitude flickered across his face, but he remained silent, letting her words speak for themselves. The cafe buzzed with whispers, some patrons moved by her defense, others remaining skeptical. Frank huffed and returned to his seat, muttering under his breath. The tension in the cafe lingered, but Olivia tried to focus on her work, her cheeks flushed from the adrenaline. She had stood up for what she believed in, but her relief was short-lived. From behind the counter, Mr. Parker, the cafe's owner, called her over. His expression was stern, his tone sharp. "Olivia," he said, motioning her into the kitchen, "what were you thinking, arguing with a customer like that?" "I wasn't arguing," she said, her voice trembling. "I was standing up for someone who didn't deserve to be treated that way." Mr. Parker shook his head, his voice cold. "This is a business, not a debate club. Frank and the regulars are the backbone of this place. If they're upset, we lose their loyalty. I can't have that." Olivia felt the words like a punch to the gut. "So you're firing me for defending someone?" Mr. Parker's tone was final. "I think it's best if you find another job." Her world shattered in an instant, fired for doing the right thing. As she left the cafe, her eyes met Steph's. He stood, watching her with an expression of regret. "I'm sorry," he said quietly as she passed. "You didn't have to do that, but it meant a lot." Olivia nodded, managing a weak smile. It was the right thing to do. The next morning, Olivia woke up with a heavy heart. The cafe, once her second home, was now just a painful memory. But she resolved to hold her head high. She had done what she believed was right, even if it cost her everything. As she approached the cafe one last time to collect her final paycheck, she noticed something unusual, a sleek black SUV parked outside. Her heart raced as she stepped inside and saw Steph Curry sitting in a booth, waiting for her. "Olivia," he said, rising to meet her, "can we talk?" Her life was about to change forever. Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing came at a cost? What would you have done in Olivia's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The tension in the Golden Fork Cafe still lingered in the air as Olivia approached Steph Curry's booth. The sleek black SUV parked outside, and the sudden appearance of one of the world's most famous athletes had left the regulars in stunned silence. Every eye in the room was on Olivia as she sat across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment, her mind racing with questions. "Olivia," Steph began, his voice calm but serious, "I couldn't stop thinking about what happened last night. What you did wasn't just brave, it was extraordinary." Olivia blinked, unsure of how to respond. She'd spent the entire night replaying the events in her mind, questioning if standing up for Steph had been worth losing her job. Now, here he was, sitting in front of her, saying words she never expected to hear. "I don't know about extraordinary," she said quietly, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of the table. "I just couldn't stand by and let someone treat you that way." Steph leaned forward, his gaze steady. "But that's exactly what makes you extraordinary. Most people would have stayed quiet. They wouldn't have risked their job to defend someone they didn't even know. But you did, and that says a lot about who you are." For a moment, Olivia couldn't speak. The humility in his tone, the sincerity in his eyes, it was overwhelming. She'd always admired him as an athlete and philanthropist, but sitting across from him now, she realized there was so much more to him than his public image. "I've been where you are," Steph continued, his voice softer now. "I've seen people judge me without knowing me. I know how much courage it takes to stand up against that, especially when it costs you something, and I respect the hell out of you for doing it." Olivia felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them away, refusing to break down in front of him. "It's just, I don't know what I'm going to do now," she admitted, her voice trembling. "That cafe was my whole world. I don't even know where to start." Steph's expression grew serious. "That's why I'm here," he said. "I want to help." Olivia tilted her head, confusion flickering across her face. "Help? How?" Steph leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but his tone filled with conviction. "My foundation is expanding. We're launching new programs to support underprivileged kids, improve access to education, and provide opportunities for people who need a second chance. And we need people like you, people who care, who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Her breath caught in her throat. "You're offering me a job?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm offering you a chance," Steph corrected, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "A chance to be part of something bigger, to use your voice and your heart to make a difference." The weight of his words left Olivia speechless. She had spent years working at the cafe, believing that her life was destined to stay small and predictable. But now, sitting across from Steph Curry, she felt the spark of something she hadn't felt in years: hope. "I don't know what to say," she finally managed, her voice thick with emotion. "Say yes," Steph said simply, his smile widening. "You don't have to decide right this second, but I think this is the kind of work you were meant to do." Olivia hesitated, her mind swirling with doubts and fears. Was she ready to take a leap like this? Could she really leave behind everything she knew and step into the unknown? But then she remembered the look on Frank's face the night before, the smug satisfaction of someone who thought they could crush another person's spirit without consequence. She remembered the humiliation of losing her job for doing what she believed was right, and she realized she didn't want to live her life playing it safe anymore. She met Steph's gaze, her resolve hardening. "Yes," she said firmly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I'd be honored." Steph reached across the table and shook her hand, his grip strong and reassuring. "Welcome to the team, Olivia." The bell above the door chimed as Steph rose to leave, turning back to offer her one last smile. "Someone from my team will reach out to you today to get things started," he said. "Thank you again for everything." As he walked out of the cafe, the silence in the room was deafening. The regulars who had once whispered behind Olivia's back now stared at her with a mixture of shock and respect. Even Mr. Parker, standing behind the counter, looked visibly shaken. He cleared his throat awkwardly as Olivia approached to collect her final paycheck. I just want to say," he began, his voice faltering, "I might have been too harsh yesterday. You're a good worker, Olivia. I'm sorry things ended this way." Olivia looked at him steadily, her voice calm but firm. "You taught me a valuable lesson, Mr. Parker," she said. "Sometimes doing the right thing is worth more than staying silent to keep a job." With that, she turned and walked out into the sunlight, her heart lighter than it had been in days. A new beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind for Olivia. She joined Steph Curry's foundation and was immediately thrown into a world that felt like a dream come true. She traveled to communities in need, helped organize educational programs, and met countless individuals whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's efforts. For the first time, Olivia felt like her voice and actions truly mattered. She wasn't just serving coffee or clearing plates, she was making a difference, one life at a time. But the transition wasn't without its challenges. Stepping into such a high-profile role came with its own set of pressures, and there were moments when Olivia questioned if she was good enough. Yet every time doubt crept in, she remembered the moment Steph Curry looked her in the eye and told her she was extraordinary, and she resolved to prove him right. Looking back, she realized that losing her job at the cafe hadn't been the end of her world. It had been the beginning of a brighter, more meaningful chapter. The weeks following Olivia's decision to join Steph Curry's foundation were nothing short of transformative. Each day brought new challenges, new faces, and new opportunities to make a difference. She quickly found herself immersed in the Foundation's work planning youth basketball camps, coordinating scholarships, and working closely with families whose lives had been shattered by hardship. For the first time, Olivia felt like she was part of something that truly mattered. She wasn't just changing lives, she was building a legacy. One sunny afternoon, Olivia stood in a crowded gymnasium, surrounded by dozens of smiling kids clutching brand-new basketballs. The air buzzed with excitement as Steph Curry himself walked onto the court, flashing his signature warm grin. The children erupted into cheers, their admiration for him palpable. Olivia watched from the sidelines, a small smile playing on her lips. This was what it was all about, giving these kids hope, showing them that they mattered. As Steph began speaking to the crowd, sharing stories of his own struggles and triumphs, Olivia felt a swell of pride, not just in him, but in herself. She had fought for this moment, for these kids, for a chance to do something meaningful. Later that day, Steph approached her, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You've been quiet," he said, handing her one. "Everything okay?" Olivia nodded, taking a sip. "I'm just taking it all in," she admitted. This is everything I never knew I needed. I've spent so much of my life playing it safe, afraid to stand out or speak up. But now, I feel like I've finally found my voice." Steph smiled, his gaze steady. "That's because you have. And trust me, Olivia, the world needs more voices like yours." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as the kids played on the court. "You know," Steph said, his tone turning reflective, "what you did back at the cafe, it wasn't just about me. You showed those people, those kids, that standing up for what's right matters. That courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard." Olivia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I didn't think anyone noticed," she said softly. "People noticed," Steph said firmly, "and they'll remember." Facing the past. As Olivia's role at the foundation grew, so did her confidence. She spoke at events, helped launch new initiatives, and became a trusted member of the team. But there was one loose end she couldn't shake: Mr. Parker and the Golden Fork Cafe. One quiet morning, Olivia decided to visit her old workplace. The cafe looked the same, its modest exterior unchanged, but stepping inside felt surreal. The familiar hum of conversation greeted her, and for a moment she was transported back to her days of refilling coffee cups and memorizing orders. Mr. Parker stood behind the counter, his back turned. When he turned around and saw Olivia, his expression shifted, first to surprise, then to something softer. "Olivia," he said, his voice tinged with guilt, "I didn't think I'd see you again." "I almost didn't come," Olivia admitted, her tone even. "But I wanted to say something." Mr. Parker set down the coffee pot he was holding, his full attention on her. The regulars in the cafe grew quiet, their curiosity evident. "I spent a long time thinking about what happened here," Olivia began. "I don't regret standing up for what I believed in. But losing this job, it taught me something. It taught me that staying silent just to keep the peace isn't worth it. And I hope, if you're ever in a situation like that again, you'll remember that." Mr. Parker looked down, his face clouded with remorse. "I made a mistake," he admitted quietly. "I was too worried about losing business to see what was really important. I'm sorry, Olivia. You deserved better." Her heart softened at his words. "Thank you," she said simply. "I hope you'll do better, for yourself and for the people who work here." As she turned to leave, the sound of slow, steady applause filled the room. Olivia glanced back to see Frank, the same man who had sparked the confrontation that changed her life, clapping. His expression was a mix of regret and respect. "You were right," he said, his voice carrying through the cafe, "about Steph. and about standing up for what's right. A ripple effect. As Olivia stepped out into the sunlight, she felt lighter than she had in weeks. She had closed a chapter of her life, but the story was far from over. Back at the foundation, her work continued to grow. She became a mentor to young women, inspiring them to find their voices and fight for what they believed in. Her story spread far beyond the cafe, resonating with people across the city, and eventually, the nation. Media outlets covered her journey, framing her as a symbol of courage and integrity. Invitations to speak at events poured in, and Olivia found herself standing on stages, sharing her story with audiences eager to hear her message. "This isn't just my story," she would say at the end of her speeches. "It's our story. It's about all of us finding the strength to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Because when we do, we make the world just a little bit brighter." The legacy lives on years later. Olivia sat in her office at the foundation's headquarters, overlooking the bustling city below. Her desk was cluttered with photos, smiling kids holding basketballs, handwritten thank you notes, and newspaper clippings documenting the foundation's successes. One photo, however, stood out. It was a picture of her and Steph, taken at the cafe the day he offered her a chance at a new life. She picked up the photo, tracing the edges with her finger, and smiled. That single moment of courage had changed everything. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. As she looked out at the city, Olivia knew her journey was far from over. There were still battles to fight, still voices to amplify, still lives to change. But she also knew this: she was ready. Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for what's right changed your life? What would you have done in Olivia's place? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories of courage and inspiration. Thank you for watching.